Howdy, readers. I'm Jason. This is Chapter and Verse. And if I sound strange at all, it's because my nose is incredibly plugged, and I'm eating or sucking on a fisherman's friend, a throat lozenge cough drop. They're not like your ordinary cough drop, like in the sense that they're not like sort of football shaped and three-dimensional and glossy. They look more like a kind of flat football shaped Necco wafer, but they taste like clove tea that has been strained through a gym sock or something. It sounds disgusting, and it is, but they work better as far as their kind of menthol properties than any other cough drop or throat lozenge I've ever had. So this is not a paid advertisement or anything like that. I was getting ready to film the video, and I just could not get my nose clear, and it still isn't clear, but it feels a little bit better. So now that we have that out of the way, welcome to another weekly, the second in my weekly Rambles with the Yarn. So I'm trying to make essentially a cat blanket for Blue, and I've started with a darker gray now, and I'm gonna do kind of a stripe of darker gray through it before returning to the light gray alpaca yarn that I've been using. So before we get to a little chatter about books and a little chatter about the films that I've been watching this last week, I wanted to do a little movie haul. So my birthday is coming up at the end of this month, and my parents got me 3 Blu-rays and 1 DVD, and so I just wanted to share those. Now, 2 of these are films that I've seen before and deeply, deeply love, and 2 of them are films that I've never seen and but really want to see. And this first one is one of those, and it is First Man. And this is beloved by my best friend Ben, who's one of the smartest movie people that I know. I've known him for 22 years. I want to say, is that right? Yeah, 22 years. He was a groomsman at my wedding, and I was at his wedding as well. His wedding was less formal than my wedding was, we'll just say. But yeah, he loves First Man and has been kind of after me to see it. So it was on sale, and so I thought I would order this with some of my birthday money. And then the other film that I haven't seen is one that I've just wanted to see for a really long time, and I've been waiting for it to appear on streaming in some way, shape, or form this year during the pandemic this last year, but it hasn't yet, so I just said, what the hell, I'll just buy it. And that is Silkwood, directed by Nichols, and starring Meryl Streep, Kurt Russell, and Cher, as you can see, as well as a lot of other really great actors. And this is a film that came out when I was a kid. I mean, I think this came out when I was 7 or 8 years old, and strangely, I've never seen it. I mean, I've seen a lot of the dramas from around that time, right, that kind of terms of endearment era, but I've never seen this, and I've wanted to for a very, very long time, and so now I have it, and I'll be able to watch it soon. But this tells the true story, if I'm not mistaken, of a woman who works at a nuclear power plant. Something goes wrong in the plant, and I don't know if she's a scapegoat for it or if she's a whistleblower, but you learn even just in the trailer for the film that she was on her way to speak with, I think, a New York Times reporter, and she, I believe, was killed en route to that interview. So, kind of a shady look at one of these industries, like many industries, where the powers that be want to have absolute say of what people know, what they don't know, what people are fed, what is kept from them. And I've just always thought it sounded fabulous. So that's Silkwood. And then here's a film I don't think I've seen since I saw it in the cinema in 93. So it's been almost 28 full years God, this is just all making me feel incredibly old. And that is Richard Attenborough's Shadowlands, about C.S. Lewis and his wife, Joy Gresham, I think was her name, starring Anthony Hopkins and Deborah Winger. And Deborah Winger was nominated for an Oscar for this. And as good as she is in it, and she is really, really good, right? There's this kind of steel-edged, flinty, brittle, sassy thing about her character. I really feel like Anthony Hopkins is the sun at the center of this film, and he really couldn't have been. I mean, maybe he could have been, but he had the misfortune, let's just say, of not having his performance nominated for an Oscar that year, because that was the same year he was in The Remains of the Day, which is not only his greatest performance, in my opinion, but one of the greatest performances ever put on screen. So, and then the last film I ordered is one that I've seen one time when I was in college, and since then, it just hasn't been in print, and I don't know when this Blu-ray edition came into print. I need to look online, but it can't have been that long ago, frankly. So this is a movie I've been dying to see again, even just after the one viewing when I was in college, and compiling my list of 100 favorite films. It made the list on the strength of just that one viewing, and that is The Shop Around the Corner, directed by Ernst Lubitsch, Lubitsch, right? And there's no nice way to say that last name, but this is wonderful. And this film was the inspiration for You've Got Mail with Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan. It's vastly superior to You've Got Mail, even though I like You've Got Mail. But that kind of goes without saying. It's an old classic romantic kind of screwball comedy with Jimmy Stewart. And it's marvelous. So that was my birthday haul from my parents. So now on to what I've been reading. I need to get a little crocheting done here as well. But I have still been reading, of course, because I'm a slow reader, Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. As part of a buddy read with Marc Nash and a frequent commenter on BookTube whose name is Sina. And I have to tell you, so I was singing the praises of this book last week. So Tony Kushner, right, the playwright Tony Kushner, who wrote Angels in America 1 and 2, Millennium Approaches, and Perestroika, which I think is I mean, of the plays that I've read anyway, I mean, that is the greatest achievement in contemporary drama. I read an interview once with Tony Kushner, and he said that he only reads one Shakespeare play a year, because if he read any more than that, he would be discouraged. And, he'd feel like, well, if I can't do this, like, what am I doing? Why am I writing at all if I can't even approach these heights? And, and I get a little bit of the same sense of what he must be talking about or feeling when I read Virginia Woolf. Now, I'm not a fiction writer, okay? And I'm not even a critical writer anymore. I haven't done any kind of critical or academic writing in, more than 10 years. And, but when I read Virginia Woolf, or fiction in particular, even though, God, I love A Room of One's Own, there is something about her prose that is so propulsive and is so electrifying and so mysterious. There are passages I just can't believe anybody wrote them, right? I mean, the writing in places is sublime. I mean, the writing in places is among the best writing I have ever read in my life. And I have read a lot of really good books. But I was reading the novel today, right? Just laying there on the couch reading. Kelly was sitting in the chair in the living room reading Dr. Zhivago. And we're just hanging out reading. And I read this passage. It was like a 2-page passage that came out of freaking nowhere. There wasn't anything that kind of foretold it or what have you. Because again, and I didn't know this last week. I didn't know, I hadn't reached the point in the book yet. So I thought, going into reading Mrs. Dalloway, that we were going to be in Mrs. Dalloway's mind the whole time. We were going to be in her consciousness. But that turns out not to be the case, right? So Virginia Woolf is kind of flitting around, jumping between consciousnesses, points of view of various characters, including characters that have no, near as I can tell, no significant role in the story. And this passage I read today, this 2-page passage, it was a case in point, right? It was just all of a sudden, Virginia Woolf, makes her way into the mind of this beggar woman in a park, who isn't even really speaking, right? She can't even really articulate words, right? It's just this kind of mewling sound that catches the attention, I think, of Peter in the scene, and then when he realizes, he turns his head and he realizes this woman standing there who has her hand out, essentially for alms. And then all of a sudden, Virginia Woolf just jumps into her head, and it was so shocking, so bracing, and so beautifully done. My God, I just started crying. Not because of what was being related, not because, I was feeling some kind of deep sympathy or empathy or what have you for the character of this beggar woman. But it was the prose itself. And I tell you what, I can count on one hand and have fingers left over the number of times in my life where it was the writing itself, right? The prose itself, the style, right? The sentences in their final finished state, arranged as the author wanted them arranged, that actually brought me to tears. That happens so rarely. In fact, the only other time off the top of my head that I can think of it was a passage in Angle of Repose by Wallace Stegner, which Brian at Bookish is actually reading right now. This passage today, Mrs. Dalloway, it was just stunning. I just don't know how the hell she did it, right? She was clearly... so we use the word genius a lot, right? We overuse the word genius in life, right? Referring to writers, artists, politicians, what have you. Although genius and politicians, it's a strange bedfellows there. But she actually was. When you read the finest sections of this novel, you not only feel like nobody else in the world or in history could have written this, because it's so unique. You wonder how anyone could have written it, right? How does anyone conceive of the approach to storytelling and to inhabiting a character in the way that she does in this novel? I just don't understand it. I just don't get it. But I tell you what, it is making me profoundly hungry to read all the rest of her fiction. So there's one passage, and it's not the passage from today that brought me to tears. It's a completely different passage. And it is one of the best passages I have ever read. Speaking for myself, I'm reading it really, really slowly, right? Because the writing is so exquisite in places, I feel like I'm missing something. And so I go back and I'll reread a paragraph or reread a page. And, but just the way in which it's structured, right? That we're essentially like on a kind of river of thought with these characters. And then all of a sudden, it'll jump to a different tributary or what have you with a different character. And, but it's fascinating because the characters themselves, slip into this kind of looking back in time, even while everything is just, it has so much forward momentum. And so the tension between those things is just fascinating by itself. But, so here's a passage in which Clarissa Dalloway, the main character, is remembering when she was much, much younger, probably in her early 20s, I would guess. And she had befriended this kind of wild child, a young woman named Sally. And And there was a kind of, to this point anyway, unconsummated romance between the two of them, between these two young women. And one of the things I love about the novel is that Virginia Woolf doesn't dance around that. Even, I mean, for the time, granted, she was this kind of bohemian figure, and the Bloomsbury group, and there was something very just kind of daring and bold about the writers and artists of that time, who kind of knew each other and kind of were running in the same circles. But she doesn't mince words in this novel, and she addresses the possibility of these two women characters falling romantically in love with each other. And the scene that I'm going to read to you, so it features four characters, right? Two men, Peter and Joseph, who are kind of walking together, and they're debating Wagner, right? Which Lukas would love, I'm sure. Lukas is a fan of this book as well. And but yeah, they kind of leave the women behind, right? And they're just kind of lost in their own discussion, trying to one-up each other, what have you. There's this extraordinary moment between Clarissa and Sally. And it goes like this. Peter Walsh and Joseph Breitkopf went on about Wagner. She and Sally fell a little behind. Then came the most exquisite moment of her whole life, passing a stone urn with flowers in it. Sally stopped, picked a flower, kissed her on the lips. The whole world might have turned upside down. The others disappeared. There she was, alone with Sally. And she felt that she'd been given a present, wrapped up, and told just to keep it, not to look at it. A diamond, something infinitely precious, wrapped up, which, as they walked up and down, she uncovered, or the radiance burnt through, the revelation, the religious feeling, when old Joseph and Peter faced them. Stargazing, said Peter. It was like running one's face against a granite wall in the darkness. It was shocking. It was horrible. Not for herself. She felt only how Sally was being mauled already, maltreated. She felt his hostility, his jealousy, his determination to break into their companionship. All this she saw as one sees a landscape in a flash of lightning. And Sally, never had she admired her so much, gallantly taking her way unvanquished. She laughed. She made old Joseph tell her the names of the stars, which he liked doing very seriously. She stood there. She listened. She heard the names of the stars. And there are so many things I love about that passage. But one of the things, and I talked about this on Voxer with Marc Nash and with Sina. One of the things I love so much about this passage is how Virginia Woolf, she's not only relating an event in the life of this character, right, in the lives of Sally and Clarissa, she is somehow conveying that feeling that happens to all of us just a handful of times in our lives, when the joy that we feel, or the love that we feel, or the kind of buoyant camaraderie that we feel in a given moment, leaves us kind of dancing inside, right? Leaves us trembling inside with light and with possibility, in such a way that it's impossible to articulate actually what's happening as it's happening. All right, it's one of those things that it's a moment that you're haunted by, in a good way, throughout your life. And Virginia Woolf has a way of relating the event itself in such a way that you also get a sense of the character of the event and the import of the event and the kind of effervescence and the transcendence, really, of the event. And I just think it is extraordinary. I think that bit of writing is some of the best writing I have ever read. And there are other passages like that. So, for instance, I've been reading aloud to this so much from Kelly that she started limiting me to one passage a day. From Mrs. Dalloway, I'm calling it the Daily Dalloway. And that passage I was telling you about before with the beggar woman that brought me to tears today, I had already read Kelly, the Daily Dalloway, before I read that. And then I was just begging and pleading with her to let me read her these 2 pages. And she said, no, like, you've already read your Dalloway for the day, so you have to hold on to it till tomorrow. And it was hard for me. Like, I just want to share it, right? I just want to share it with people. So I would read it to you now, but like I said, it's 2 full pages. This video is already going to be long, so I won't. But Mrs. Dalloway is just, it's knocking me out. I had to look through my book journal, and granted, I'm only about half done with the novel right now, but it is the best novel that I read for the first time in at least the last 2 years. 2 years almost to the day, right? Like, the last thing I read that affected me as much in the moment was Lincoln in the Bardo by George Saunders, which I read which I finished in early January in 2019. So 2 years. And the last thing I wanted to do, last couple of things, right? So I got a little thing I want to talk to you about just briefly at the end. But I wanted to share with you the films that I've watched in the last week. And those would be, so I've only watched 4 films since last I talked to you. So I saw for the first time The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, and the second film in Steve McQueen's Small Axe film anthology, Lover's Rock. And then I rewatched Fire in the Sky, directed by Robert Lieberman, and then Ghostbusters. And I've seen Ghostbusters literally probably 70 times. But the film out of that bunch that I wanted to talk with you a little bit about was Fire in the Sky, which is a film, I think it came out in 93, and I saw it in the theater when it came out. And I don't think, and I liked it, but I don't think I had seen it since then, right? So it's been, again, making me feel old, almost 28 years since I saw that movie. And I thought it was really well done. I thought it was really well acted up until the end. I thought that there was some acting near the end that was a little bit schmaltzy or what have you. But the cast, and this was a cast of, like, who's who among young men at that time. Kind of not A-listers, but B-listers, like really great, solid B-list actors like D.B. Sweeney and Craig Sheffer, who played Norman McLean, and in A River Runs Through It, Robert Patrick, who was in T2, which, believe it or not, I've still never seen. Peter Berg, who was in A Midnight Clearing, has gone on to become a well-respected director in his own right. But it tells the story, right, based on a true story, of a young logger who disappeared in the early 1970s in Arizona, right? So him and the rest of his crew were leaving the job site in the middle of the woods one night, and they came upon what looked like fire reflected in the sky, okay, like a forest fire or something, and then they realized that it wasn't that, and there was a craft of some kind in the air, right, and the D.B. Sweeney character, Travis, I think his name's Travis Walton, gets out of the truck because he's young and stupid, and that's just what young and stupid guys do, and approaches this thing. And everybody else stays in the truck because they're a little bit older and they're, a lot wiser. And they're yelling and pleading with him to get back in the truck. And he doesn't. And he's struck by a beam of light, right? And they think he's dead, and they're panicked themselves, and they race off. And they don't get too terribly far before the Robert Patrick character, who's the best friend of the D.B. Sweeney character, decides to go back. And so he lets everybody else out, and they wait by the road. And he goes back and doesn't find anything, right? So they get back to town. Travis is missing, and he's missing for, I think, 5 days. And during that whole time, the whole town becomes suspicious of these young men, that there's foul play of some kind, right? That they've killed him, buried him in the woods, like they go out searching for him. And then he shows up, and he's fucked up, man. I mean, he's a guy who's going to need therapy for the rest of his life based on how he's acting and what have you. And yeah, and the story goes that he's been abducted by aliens, right? And so I've done some reading, and the screenwriter of the film embellished his story, which isn't surprising, right? They want to make it as cool and as spooky and as Hollywoody as they can, and it's very creepy. All the stuff on the craft is very, very creepy. But it just made me wonder, like, so Kelly and I are big fans of Ancient Aliens. Right now, the guys on Ancient Aliens, particularly the guy, I can never pronounce his name. He's got a Greek last name, and his hair looks like he's, stuck his finger in a light socket. That guy, a fake tan dude. I mean, these guys are batshit crazy. They're nuts, right? And on some level, I feel like the early seasons of that show were very sincere. Like these people, hey, I'm nuts, but I don't know it. And and they're talking about all of these just crazy ideas that they genuinely believe, and I think it's become more of an act, I suppose, for them. But so here's the thing: like, I'm curious to know from those of you watching this video, how many of you believe that there's something out there, right? Not necessarily like in a little green men kind of way, but an intelligence out there that is capable, civilizations out there that are capable of interstellar travel, right? Visiting us if they so choose. I've never had any kind of experience with a UFO myself, but I think my uncle has, and my mother. So years and years and years ago, my mom was a nurse, and she used to work the graveyard shifts at the hospital. And one night when she was going to work, and I didn't learn about this until much, much later. So her going to work involved a long stretch of road that was kind of out in the country, and there weren't many street lights around or anything like that. And so she's working her graveyard shift, and it's in the wintertime, and she's driving to work, and it's like 6:45, and it's pitch black out. And she told us that there was not a beam, but like a sheet of just fucking pure white light coming from somewhere high enough that she couldn't see, and just down on the road, right? Like an elevator door, just down on the road. And she didn't really have any choice but to drive through it, and so she did. And that was it, right? I mean, but it was this crazy white light out in the middle of nowhere that was coming from the sky and was so bright and so kind of solid that she couldn't see beyond it, and she just had to cross her fingers and hope that it wasn't anything that she wasn't going to regret. So that's an unusual situation. But I find myself wondering how many of you believe that we're not alone in that, kind of Close Encounters, X-Files kind of way, right? Not necessarily War of the Worlds, but I mean, civilizations out there that are curious about, just as we are, about what's out there. So let me know in the comments below. And then the last thing that I wanted to talk with you guys about, just very briefly, was how many of you during the pandemic have been having, at the very least, more often than you would ordinarily have, how many of you have been having bad dreams or even nightmares during the pandemic? And I ask because I have been having a lot of bad dreams the last 10 months. Not every night, but I would say more nights than not. But I had a nightmare last night that was by far the most intense and chilling and just unsettling dream I have had in my whole adult life. And I felt like, when I woke up this morning, I felt like I had been dreaming it all damn night long. I felt exhausted by how the dream made me feel. And in short, right, I mean, so in the dream, I was in a cult of some kind. And I had gotten my brother involved in this cult. And I mean, it's this huge compound, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't know what the cult was. I don't know how much of it was religion and how much of it was cult or what have you, like where the ratio was. But then I was told that they're the people who had been in the cult. This is a very kind of Midsommar kind of thing, right? There were people in the cult who had reached a certain age, right? These elderly people who had opted against assimilating into society at large, right? The Western civilization beyond the borders of this compound or what have you. And upon reaching that age, they essentially put themselves up to be burnt alive. And so I was enlisted to help construct the cage in which these people would be collected and burned. And that there would be a procession of them. They would voluntarily offer themselves up to be locked up in this cage and burned alive. And I had gotten my brother in the dream. I got my brother involved in the cult, and in the dream he was much younger than me than he is in real life. In real life, he's like 18 months younger than me, and in the dream, I want to say he was maybe 10 years younger than me, and I took aside a woman in the cult who I was friends with, who's actually that old friend of mine who drew this illustration on my film journal that I had mentioned last week. And so she was in the dream, and I took her aside and I said, like, why is this happening with the burning of these people? Like why is this a thing? What's going on? And she just said, it's always been this way. And so I'm like, oh, all right, well. And so I'm like, loading. At one point, I was loading seats, these kind of wooden chairs into this massive cage where these people would be burned, and then there was one seat that had to be carefully constructed, and it was made out of metal. And I just remember thinking, like, why? Why a metal seat, right? Is this person planning on, putting themselves through even more hell in the burning? In order to achieve some kind of enlightenment or something? I didn't know, but I was unsettled. And when I was talking to my friend in the dream, my brother kept trying to get hold of me, and he had learned of it, and he just wanted out. And then I realized that we both needed to get out. And there was this scene where all the people. It was like The Lottery, right, by Shirley Jackson, and all these people. Everybody's kind of coming to watch, and everybody's sort of cheerful and whatnot. And the procession of these old men and women, it was a little bit like when the young nuns in Marketa Lazareva, right? The film that Lukas chose earlier this last year in our Wednesday Night Film Club. I can't remember if it's Czech or Polish, but it's this kind of strange, glorious film about the Middle Ages. And there's this scene where we have this procession of these young nuns coming up this hillside, and they all have like a little bird, a dove or something in their hands. And it reminded me a little bit of that in the dream, except for the faces of these men and women were just garishly made up, right, in makeup. And not in any kind of elegant way at all, but and not quite clown-like, but in a way that made you uneasy. And that was the dream, right? They were going to be burned, and everybody was just kind of, was all on board with this and was excited about it, looking forward to it, and it was just, again, what happened. And the dream just really shook me up. It left me really, really shaken, and I was watching old 80s music videos last night before I went to bed, and I watched that Bonnie Tyler video for Total Eclipse of the Heart. And if you've ever seen that video, that's probably the most fucked up video of all time. It's weird as hell what's going on. There are ninjas and there are zombies, and there's a boarding school. It's a crazy video. So maybe that had some kind of effect on my psyche or my unconscious. I don't know. I'm just curious now, how many of the rest of you have been having bad dreams during the pandemic? And I suppose I'm asking because I just want to remind myself that I'm not alone, right? Kelly's been having bad dreams as well, much more often than usual. And so I'm just curious to know, if we're alone, if it's just me and Kelly. So let me know in the comments below. And I will see you guys again very, very soon. Maybe even before you know it. So, adios.